Welcome back, everybody, to more from the Stabilize. I'm here today with Jordan. How's it going, Jordan?
Pretty good.
That's good. And we're having a look at a Reshiram Charizard list that was quite successful in Sydney Regionals, which is Dave Patane's third or fourth place. I don't know which one it was, David. Which one were you?
Top four. That's all that matters.
Top four, that's all that matters. Who cares about the number? Welcome, David. How's it going?
It's going great. Nice to have me.
Nice to have me. Always so confident.
Yes, it's nice. It is nice to be here.
No worries. It's nice to have you. No problems. All right. Well, you can see up on the screen now the list that David played to quite a successful finish, and it's not the Reshiram Charizard list that people had been expecting to see success, which was the Jirachi kind of Miltanky build. It's actually more of a Greens exploration build, David.
Yeah, while other people were at the Euro IC, I was there looking at the variants of the list, and I like this one better, especially in the mirror match. Its reliability to get any 2 cards you want is better than only looking at 5 cards that you could potentially want.
Yeah, for sure.
Jirachi.
Beautiful. So we'll just run through the counts. We've got 3 copies of Reshiram Charizard and 1 EV Snorlax. That seems like a pretty a thick line. I know lots of people, when they were playing this deck, would go down to 2 Reshiram Charizard. Why did you choose to go with 3?
I just want that ultra consistency because I thought if I was having a mirror, having one of in the mirror, you definitely want the Reshiram over the EV, and having one of them prized would be difficult in that matchup. In the future, it could be changed, but for now, it was just for that ultra consistency.
Fair enough.
That's fair enough, especially since the Snorlax is only specific in some matchups, of course. But what were some of the main matchups that you found yourself using Snorlax in? Obviously, Zoroark is one of the big ones, I think. But were there any times where the Snorlax really came in handy?
In Zoroark matchups, if there were the variant that didn't run Lycanroc, of course, Pikarom out of my matchups was the big one that Snorlax was relevant in. It's a GX move doing 210, which is 240 with the choice band. Even if you didn't get to draw up to 10 cards, it's still amazing in that matchup because just allowed you to switch into it and attack. And then obviously anything that walled fire Pokemon like Arachnids or Bronzongs. Wasn't expecting them, but I didn't want to have no answer if that happened.
Yeah, it leaves you the option, doesn't it? Sorry, Jordan. Oh,
that's all right.
Jumping all over each other here. We're just so keen to talk about the list. There are another couple of cards that people would expect to see, and that's Baby Volcanion with Flare Starter. You've opted to run 3. Other lists running maybe 1 or 2, but with the Greens build, did you find that the higher Volcanion count was better?
Yeah, that's another thing. When you're going second, you needed that guaranteed Volcanion on that turn to get like any sort of momentum back in your favor. So I ended up dropping other luxury items, which we'll go through later, for like the 3rd Volcanion, just to guarantee that fire starter on the 2nd turn.
Yeah, it means that those decks that are playing Kiawe that can get out in front of you, at least you've got the opportunity to catch back up if you are going second. So it's a nice card to put in there. Also, did you find that it was really helpful in those 1 prize matchups as well?
Yeah, it was amazing to knock out Zapdos. It does exactly 110, which is very relevant. And even when you don't have the energies, there's other things you can usually knock out with the 50 damage, especially with Kukui's in there.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Jordan, before we move on to the more interesting Pokemon in the list?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about Volcanion, obviously the 50 damage, even if it's just to set up knockouts for Reshiram later on, can be pretty useful, and the 120 HP is especially good against decks like Zapdos. But yeah, moving on to the next Pokemon, some of the ones that stand out to me especially is the 1-1 Flareon, which we were just saying how Volcanion is a really good lead Pokemon if you're going second, but Flareon's not too bad of a turn 1 attacker either, actually.
No, it's a single prize heat stage. Sorry, single energy to use heat stage. I did actually get to Kukui. During playtesting, I was Kukuiing to knock out Jirachis with that, and
nice.
It attaching 3 energies. If everything other than the Reshiram actually has an attack which charges up energy onto it in my deck, which is also relevant. And so Heat Stage is getting a knockout, attaching energy to yourself. 190 is relevant against Ultra Malamar, so Ultra Necrozma, which you don't really want to get 3 prizes on all your tag teams the whole time, so that's a relevant thing. And obviously its GX attack is sneaky. because it's
can cut
only
off
one
quickly,
energy
can't
cost.
it? Yeah.
It was very relevant in the semi-finals, the Power Burner GX.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where there can be no sign of it, and then suddenly, bang, you're getting hit by that power burner, which is a really, really cool attack. You've also got another interesting card that you can kind of just drop down and attack with, and that's a Victini Prism Star with infinity 20 times the amount of basic energy in your discard. For 2 fire energy, that's easily powered up with a welder.
Yeah, it's the 4th single prize attacker I have in my deck. Welder charges that up. You don't get consistent attacks with it because it will shuffle all the energy back into your deck. But I use it as for 2 purposes in my deck. I dropped my fire crystal count down to 1, and so Victini was a way of recycling that fire energy, which was very relevant in some matchups when you burn through your fire energy, and then you got to get it back into your deck.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it also gives you an opportunity to take a big knockout as well, because with how many energy do you run? 13. I guess there's a maximum realistically of 220 damage that you can do. That could take out a tag team. That's a big hit if everything goes well.
Yeah, if something else already has some chip damage on it. It's also the easiest retreater in my deck. So to get Charizard to get those chain knockout, I'd have to retreat. And into the Jirachi is just a single energy attachment, which means I can Guzma, attach the energy, retreat, and then do Flare Strike again, which was relevant in lots of matchups.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea that people might not have considered, especially since Flare Strike is so powerful. You want to be using that as frequently as you can. We'll run through your supporter line now, just before we move on to your trainers. We've obviously got 4 copies of Green Search. This is probably your go-to supporter to try and get everything down. Did you ever find yourself in a position where that sneaky energy evolution Eevee was on the field and you couldn't play greens?
It was what cost me my first round.
Oh, really? Oh my god.
Game 3 opening hand was Eevee, bunch of energies, Flareon and greens. So I'm like,
no.
Oh boy, that's it. Put down the Eevee, couldn't evolve because I attached the energy and my opponent saw me search my deck for a fail because the Flareon was in my hand. So what can you do?
No,
it's not as bad as it being prized, so at least you can use green turn too, but it's still not ideal.
Yeah, no, well the game didn't give me a chance to have a second turn, so what can you do if you're versing? Yeah, it's very easy to get knocked out by Zapdos, that poor Eevee. But apart from that, that's the only time I wasn't able to use the greens. It's very reliable for me to get it on the first turn.
And what did you find yourself going for with greens? There's lots of options. What kind of things were you really seeking out?
So usually I always went for out of these 4, I always tried to make sure that I fixed them up with green. So either the Nest Ball to get another bench Pokemon out. Usually I want to get the Volcanion in the active and a Reshizard on the bench. So I'd have to get Nest Ball, I'd have to get a Switch if my Volcanion isn't ready in the active. Then I would get either a Welder or a Fiery Flint to go for the next turn. And then if all is going well, the Power Plant is a nice one as well, because that can just destroy other opponent strategies if I get that up if I'm going first or second.
Yeah, let's talk about Power Plant just very quickly. This card is super, super underrated, and you're playing 3 copies of it.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones where lots of people will be sitting back going, okay, so maybe Reshizard plays a Power Plant to go along with its Heat Factory, as long as, like I'm a Zoroark player, as long as I keep a Field Blower to get rid of the Power Plant, I should be fine. And then you play down another Power Plant, and you're like, oh god, well, I run 2 Field Blowers, so I get that one, and they can't be running any more than 2. That third Power Plant, how frequently did it come up for you?
Well, all the time, almost. I mentioned how greens gets you 2 things. That strategy only works if you have high enough counts of other things for them to naturally fall into your hands.
Yeah.
And having that, if you go turn 1, you put down a Power Plant, it's like practically as good as a Marshadow in most cases.
Yeah, it just completely turns off. And Zoroark, which would usually, I'd consider to have a reasonably good matchup against Reshizard, playing 3 Power Plant, like, what are you can't do anything about that, especially if you want to get rid of the Heat Factory as well. So that's a really, really cool count. We'll just run through the rest of the supporters very quickly, unless you want to ask a question, Jordan.
I was just going to say, with 4 stadiums especially, a lot of decks are going to struggle to get rid of all 4 of those, and Power Plant especially good against Zoroark, obviously, but what other matchups would you say that the Power Plant was able to swing in your favour a little bit?
The Mirror Match was the biggest one. When I say the Mirror Match,
the other one was Reshizard.
Yeah, the one that run Kiawe, because if you have to run Kiawe, it means you have to run Tapu Lele. which means they're also running like other GX
The
support
Dene,
cards, like the
etc.
Dene. Yeah, and you just shut that down, they can't do anything. That really puts them at a slower start. Anything that runs like Pikarom also shuts that down because it needs the it needs a Dedenne, and even at some points Zap Beast, when they have the Coco GX, they still had to remove it. But that for other reasons we lost that matchup. But it does shut down those relevant things. Yeah.
Pretty cool, that extra power plant there, those 3. Anyway, let's move through the supporters. We've got 4 copies of World. This is obviously one of your main supporters alongside Green to attach 2 energy. We won't talk too much about it because it's a pretty self-explanatory card. It just helps you set up your attackers. The ones I want to talk more about are next to the Welder. We've got 2 copies of Kukui and 1 copy of Lieutenant Surge's Strategy. Let's talk about that, because that's not a card that we often see in Reshizard. Why did we choose the 2 Kukui and 1 Surge?
The Kukui was there purely to get a one-shot on opponent Charizards with Flare Strike, so it didn't have to wait the GX move. So obviously 230, Choice Band, and Kukui gets that knockout. So ideally you need to knock out 2 Charizards, so 2 Kukuis. But again, I just wanted to get a natural Kukui into my hand naturally, because Welder does let you draw 3 cards. So you don't have the best card draw. The Lieutenant Surge was there purely for a security card if I was getting behind. I originally thought it was going to be used for when I was versing the Reshizard mirror match, but I actually found it getting more value in matchups where I start with Volcanion and I force my opponent to knock that Volcanion out, because then when I just had the greens in the semi-final, I actually got to go like double Welder. In the second turn, and so out of nowhere there was a Reshizard, and like, oh, there you go.
That has 5 energy on it now. Oh my god.
That escalated really quickly.
That's really cool.
But yeah, it worked. It's there purely for the a security card. It's not completely essential, but the fact that you can usually predict if you're going to be in threat of next turn or getting knocked out because you have that much HP. You should know what your opponent's deck is able to do, and you can always greens for it the turn before, and so your opponent knows, oh, now on top of me knocking you out, I also have to refresh your hand.
Yeah, I have to deal with the fact that you're about to put 5 energy onto the field.
With Welders. Out of nowhere.
Yeah,
or you can even do like, you can just threat with the Guzma plus Welder, means that you're using the GX move out of nowhere, and like a 200 damage precision attack is just as scary.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's probably my favourite inclusion in this deck, that Lieutenant Surge. It's the thing that when I looked at the list, I was like, oh, that's a spicy card. I want to talk to David about this Surge.
I actually really like the double Professor Kukui, not only just in this deck in general, but I think it's really strong in this list, because if we have a look at some of David's other attackers, such as the Victini and the Flareon, Kukui gets even more uses out of this list than it usually would. Like, did you ever find yourself pulling off Kukui with either Victini, Flareon, or Volcanion to maybe do 130 damage and take out an Onyx instead of just missing 110?
Yeah, I used it with the Volcanion I had to save it when I was versing that beast to knock out the Buzzwole.
Yep.
It's the only thing I have apart from the Reshizard to actually knock out Buzzwole. The Eevee and the Flareon and the Victini, not so much. Because anything that was going to knock out is usually I used the Victini mainly just to knock out Jirachis if I had nothing big to knock out. Once it did knock out a Dedenne, which is not bad.
Good. that's a fine thread.
That's good value. I'll take that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now we've got 3 copies of Guzma in the list as well. I'm not super sure on what the traditional, in quotation marks, count of Guzma is, but were you happy with 3 on the day? You want more? You want less? Like, how do you feel about it?
Well, funny story, during one of the matches, I burnt both my Guzmas at the start, or two of my Guzmas, and I thought, oh, that's it, I've got to play smart. I've run out of all my Guzmas. This is from someone who's been playing like Zoroark for like 3 months straight. and when I searched my deck with greens, and I'm like, oh, hold on, I run a third one. Oh, easy. All right, I'll get that out for next turn. And then the person just like, all right, let's go to the next game. Guzma next turn.
There's nothing I can do.
So 3 is good. I think 4 would just it does clump up your hand at the start when you want to you'd rather draw into better supporters.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because there's no way you have of refreshing your hand in here. But I think you'd need more than 2 because you will have to use some of your Guzmas to refresh your Charizard attacks. And unless you get the perfect game where you can knock out 2 tag teams in a row, you're going to need that 3rd Guzma to actually knock stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. That's completely reasonable. Now, let's look at the rest of the item cards we've got, the trainers. We've got 4 copies of Poker Gear. Obviously, just that extra bit of consistency to help you get into the cards that you need means that one sneaky surge can be found a little easier as well. What was your number 1 go-to supporter off of the Poker Gear? Like, if you got all of them, obviously it's situation dependent, but if you got all of the supporters off of the Poker Gear, which one would you be picking up?
If I'm going first turn, I'm always going green because that's always going to get me like my power plant, which obviously if I'm versing someone that I know they have GX stuff. Otherwise, I would usually go for the welder just to get that acceleration of energy. Even on if nothing happens that turn, if I still get 2 energy, it puts me 2 energies against my opponents. Otherwise, I'm just picking up a supporter for the next turn, which is like that Guzma or the Lieutenant Surge if it's not an amazing start for me.
If you look like you're going to go behind. It's a good card, Poker Gear, and didn't see a huge amount of play over the weekend, but it's going to see a lot coming up, so definitely worth keeping your play set of those. We've also got 4 Nest Ball, as we mentioned before, good for getting all of your Pokemon out. Even Flareon, which is a Stage 1, comes down out of a Nest Ball when you evolve the Eevee, so no other Ball Search. Did you ever find yourself missing those Ball Search cards, or was green enough to just get you the extra one when you needed it?
No, because I very rarely ever needed to get more than 4 Pokemon out. Between Nest Balling them out, that's just for the first turn to get that guaranteed Volcanion into whatever big Pokemon I want to charge up in the bench. Otherwise I could just greens for it. I didn't need to run like the other Charizard list that has to run 4 Nest and 4 Ultra Balls. So that's essentially 4 spaces that I have opened up.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's nice. Now, one of the things that I find most interesting about this list is, we already talked about it very briefly, but the Fire Crystal split is a little more Fiery Flint heavy than what we've been seeing in previous lists.
Yeah, this is just from our early playtesting. The original, or the standard list is 3 and 2, and just had so many times I'm just have 2 Fiery Crystals in my hand. I'm like, I don't want this. I'd much rather naturally draw into Fiery Flints, and then I'll deal with my energy count later.
So did that low Fire Crystal count ever come up? Did you get punished for it, or was Victini enough to kind of mitigate the lack of the Fire Crystal?
The Victini was definitely enough. Because I could always see how many energies in my hand, how many left in the deck, and I just have to know my game strategy was in 1 or 2 turns, or 1 or 2 attacks later, Victini is going to have to refresh the energy back into my deck. As I said, when I knocked out a Dedenne, that's a lot of energy that went back into the deck, like 8 energy, and I'm like,
that's good. Sweet, we're ready to go, let's go.
especially when you cycle that energy back in with Victini, the fact that I have 3 Fiery Flints mean I probably still have access to another Fiery Flint at that point, and so I can get those 4 energies from into my deck into my hand on the next turn.
Yeah,
it seems like a count that I would be worried about playing if I didn't have the Victini, but with that Victini being in the deck, and if you use it at the right time, it seems like the perfect count to make that worthwhile.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, we've got 3 more items. We've got 1 copy of Escape Rope and 2 copies of Switch. Without the Jirachi, maybe they're not as useful, but like you said, you're really keen to get those Charizard attacks refreshed. Would you change the split from 2-1 to 3 Switch, or what? Like, how did you feel about that particular split on the day?
I found it was like I found that it worked quite effectively. Having 2 Switch meant I could always how to say it. You can, if you have an Escape Rope and a Switch, you can choose to play that to get something on their bench. But if you ever play 2 Escape Ropes, you actually have no control in whichever Pokemon your opponent wants to bring up, because they can choose to switch and put the active Pokemon back in. But if you have that combination of, you can either choose to play 2 switches, and then you're only switching your Pokemon to get your Reshiram back in to active, to attack, or you can go Escape Rope and switch, and then you're guaranteed going to kill something on their bench, which is what happened in the match where I killed the Dedenne. They had an active tag team, which I couldn't knock out, but everything else on the bench I could. So getting that switch acted as good as a Guzma to me. So the Escape Rope.
Beautiful.
And so that's why that 2-to-1 ratio, I think, is the optimal ratio, because you can choose with that combination anything you want to get a combination of your or your opponent's Pokemon into the active.
Yeah, it's a cool little interaction and something that people might not generally think of, but that escape rope is good for getting those things on the bench that maybe your opponent is kind of happy to throw away, like a Dedenne. 4 cards left. We've got 1 copy of Heat Factory Prism Star. Good card for drawing extras. Was this obviously you saying that Power Plant was a go-to for greens early on? When did you find Heat Factory most useful? Is it an early game card, late game card? When did you play it the most?
I usually end up playing it in the mid game if I've slowed their setup so I have more energies on, or if I slowed their setup enough so the turn they would have played Kiawe or the turn after they played Kiawe. After that, I'm okay to swap the Power Plant out just to give me more things, access to more cards in my hand, versus anything where the GX actually doesn't matter, and that beast or whatever.
Yep.
I just get more access to stuff, and I mean, you have to play it in Charizard. It's one of the most amazing Prism Star stadiums.
It's too good.
And even, especially with the 4 copies of Fiery Flint, I imagine that gives you even more access to the Heat Factory, when sometimes with Fire Crystal you would just not be able to use it in certain hands.
Yeah, because you'd only get 3 energies back. You'd be burning 1, which means that if you welded, you wouldn't have the extra energy. You'd have to draw into it naturally. But having the Fiery Flint means you could always burn. You can then welder, and then also add your 3rd energy on.
Now, I'm actually very interested in your tool split, because obviously Two Choice Band is a fairly standard card to include. But I'm a big fan of this one of Wishful Baton. So run us through what that card's main uses were.
Okay, so main uses were in the mirror match or against any tag team, which I only versed Reshirams and Pikaroms for tag teams. You put down... I made a meta call that I didn't think I was going to be versing a lot of Field Blowers. Yep. I have my Reshiram that... So first turn, I have a Volcanion in the active. I'm going second, but first turn. Volcanion in the active, I load up 3 energies onto a Reshizard onto the bench, and I slap on that Choice Band. So I'm the Wishful Baton. The opponents, they have to think, if I kill that Reshizard with my GX move or my big attack, there is guaranteed those 3 energies are going to go onto another Reshizard, and that's going to knock out with their GX move, and then I have all the energy on my field and you have none because you've used Kiawe and other stuff already. So having that Wishful Baton saving those 3 energies is the massive momentum move. It's practically the same as playing another welder on the second turn if you can save those 3 energies.
And plus, when you can just surge and play 2 welder as well, it seems like a lot of energy that you can have on the field after you fall behind.
If I had a Tapu Lele, I could do so much damage.
Oh my god!
Energy.
Yeah, so energy drive for 180.
Seems like it's very easy to put yourself in almost like a checkmate position if you can get this card the right time.
Well, you can, because I have access to 4 greens and 4 Pokemon. Yeah, it's just another one of the things where you have to identify what's going to happen next turn. If I identify that this Reshizard is going to get knocked out, put on a Wishful Baton, great. The other issue you have, if I didn't get access to that, which one game I needed it, and it was prized, because the Volcanion does let you attach the 3 energies anywhere you want, so you have to split them, usually 2 to 1 on 2 Reshizards. It's not the biggest problem, but it does mean you need the Welder next turn to get any significant attack of. While if I put all 3 energies onto a single Reshizard with a Wishful Baton, that thing is guaranteed going to attack next turn. It only needs 1 energy to attack with its non-GX attack, which puts you in a better position because you don't have to draw into the Welder. You can choose to Guzma or do anything else during your next.
Or play the Kukui that you need to take the knockout.
Yeah, the extra damage.
Yeah.
Or if you have the Wishful Baton, you're not going to be able to Kukui.
Oh yes, of course, because you won't have the Choice Band. That's all right.
Yeah. You can also just choose to just outrage, because if they knock you out again, you get to keep your energies, and then if you get to attach those 3 energies, almost guaranteed to get out the boosted tag team attack off.
Which is exceptional. So overall, this list looks pretty good. Obviously, you got 13 energy. We won't talk too much about that because, I mean, how many more energy do you want to play? Like, would you consider playing 14, 15, 16 energy? Like, that seems like a lot.
I don't think I need more. I could argue between going less, but why not? If it works so far, I'll go with it. Because yes, you are using Fiery Flints. The relevance is as you use more Fiery Flints, you actually are also thinning out your deck, which is very good considering you drawing three cards after you attach to energies sounds amazing because it is, but also it's not outstanding. It's not perfect. So drawing 3 cards. There was times when I drew 3. It's like, oh, okay, 3 energies. I'll put these with the other 7 in my hand.
That's like sweet, no worries.
Well, I'd rather a welder at this point, but so I'd rather something else at this point. But that's okay. Thinning out your deck does lower the chances of that happening, and which is pretty good.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously quite successful, ending up in top 4. But we want to know how you got there. Talk us through the first couple of rounds with Reshizard. How'd you feel? How'd you go? What kind of matchups did you play? Were they interesting, or did you just attach a bunch of energy and say, you're dead?
Yeah. Sign this match, please.
Yes, I've attached 4 energy. That is game.
It felt like that in some matches. The day started off atrociously. That terrible hand I was talking about was the game 3 of match 1. Starting with I put down that lone Eevee, Flareon in my hand, greens. I'm like, oh, I can't even play greens this turn. So terrible loss. Then
and you said that was against Zapdos, right?
Yeah, Zap Beast. So,
how do you feel about that matchup in general? I feel like with the Kukui and the Volcanions, it's not too bad as opposed to some other Reshiram builds.
Well, like any mid-tier player, I figured out the actual winning strategy after the event. Well, not the slightly better strategy after that event. I think I was playing the Reshizards wrong. I was going Volcanions and Victinies at the start of the game and then ending up with the Reshizard, which meant it was always Nihiligo or a Tapu Koko GX attack just knocking me out, and there was no it was game. But if you did it in the other direction, it's
so
more
starting
possible.
with the Reshiram? Yeah,
starting with the Reshiram, getting 1 to 2 prizes with that, because at least it means then the Tapu Koko GX has to stay on the field to get the knockout, which means then I'm able to get 2 prizes back. Also, I may just have to add more cards to the deck to deal with that matchup, swapping in like Acer Rollers or Max Potions or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's something that the deck will have to be changed. I'm lucky that I only ran into 3 of them out of my 10 matches, so that was okay. The next match was Weezing, which just having a big amount of HP is good in that matchup.
Yep.
Weezing also needs a critical mass of Pokemon on the bench, and because my optimal start is just Volcanion and the active Reshiram on the bench, that's nothing. So there was never a situation where there was enough Pokemon to get like a good energy swap happening.
With the Lele?
The damage
yeah,
swap,
with the Lele, yeah. Sorry, the damage swap. One game I had to start with Eevee Snorlax, which I knew there was going to be a problem with Larvitar, but that is what it is.
And I guess the good thing about that matchup as well is that every time they just poke a little bit more, it means that your outrage is more potent. So you just sit there with 2 energy on a Reshizard and just keep knocking out their Weezings until they eventually don't have any left.
Yeah, and it was a very good game to have 4 stadiums in that one.
I can imagine.
It was just like replaced. And also niche things like Flareon GX not taking any damage from Weezing.
Yes.
That's because it's like one of the only... Yeah, it's a stage 1 that comes out in a single turn. So every other stage 1 would always take some point of damage because you just have to retreat into the Weezing. But having that Flareon meant that in order to get damage on it, had to switch into the Tapu Koko, which just meant it was an unideal attacker for that turn. So I think it has a fairly okay matchup with Weezing, just because my variant runs less Pokemon on the bench.
For sure. So you're 1-1 after 2 rounds. You got 6 more to go. How you feeling?
At this point, I'm like,
what are you
it's
thinking?
possible. At this point, it's possible. I said, but I really designed my deck list to verse other Reshizards. I was saying to the people I was playtesting with, I said, I think the Turbo one could be better against every deck because it has like good counters to whole things. But this one's designed to beat tag teams, and I haven't versed one yet. What's wrong? This is flashbacks. This is flashbacks of Oceania IC, where I'm like, it's fine. I'm okay. Just I can't verse Zapdos and Shrine, and then you verse 7 Zapdos Shrine.
Just play the whole thing the whole day. It's like, oh god, this could be the worst tournament. I could just play Zapdos for the rest of the day. And you're also sitting there being like, everyone's playing Quagsire and Ganondorf and Blastoise. Good god, when will the pain stop?
Yeah, I heard that. I'm like, I don't want to fall into that bracket because then you're stuck with them the whole time.
Yep, you're there forever. So round 3, who'd you end up? What matchup do you end up facing?
That was Reshizard with Kiawe.
Yes.
I was like, yes, this is what I've been doing. I go through and they Marshadow me. I'm like, cool. Marshadows me into like Pokey Gear and Greens. And I'm like, okay, this is fine. Let's go knockout win. Yep.
Yep. Sweet.
I think actually that one I lost the first game because I actually dead drew on the first one, but they started with the Tortonator, Kiawe. It's manually attaching energy as well, so they got 5. And then the next turn, thinking of the strategy, I'm like, you attach an energy and you knock me out. Oh, okay. Good. All right,
Cool.
next turn.
No worries.
And then win the other 2. I won the other 2 games with that one, so good. Then round 4, another Reshizard, Kiawe again. In all these ones where I'm going first, put down that stadium because they all have this particular one ran the Marshadow that removes the stadium. So that is slightly better for them, except they're also using resources to get rid of a card that I have 3 of in my deck, and it doesn't slow me down ever playing that.
Yeah, it's never gonna like completely ruin you. All it's gonna do is let them catch up a little bit.
Yeah, and then they removed it, and I just brought it back again later because even though it didn't stop the Dedenne being played, I mean that they had limited access to like Guzma's late game because they couldn't use the Tapu Lele GX for it.
Yeah,
I would almost argue that the power plant is just as strong, if not stronger, in the late game against Reshi than it is in the early game.
Yeah, because once they get their Kiawe out, they don't really need anything. It's just to stop that. It's to stop that early Tapu Lele Dedenne. If you don't stop that, then yeah, late game, because they always will end up Guzmaring for the win, or even once you knock out their first Reshizard, they need to get a Welder to start attacking again because they don't run Wishful Baton. That's
so you're what 3-1 now, and now things are feeling real good, I imagine.
Yeah, now things are like, oh, okay.
Sweet. It wasn't so bad after all.
It wasn't so bad. Let's keep going. Let's keep these tag team train going. Then we verse Pikarom.
Yes.
I think this is a very good matchup.
Yeah, this seems almost free, I'd imagine.
Obviously, it's still the most turbo deck in format because they can get 6 energy at the end of their first attacking turn.
Yeah, and you can
only get 4. Only 4. Unless I get knocked out, then I can get 5 with double surge. But yeah, this one, it's the EV Snorlax. Getting that with I got to get the bonus attack off because first turn I Volcanion onto the EV Snorlax, and the next turn Welder. So that's 5 energies, and I'm like, cool. I'll draw up to 10 cards, and then I had everything in my hand for the rest of the game at that point.
Beautiful.
And again, they also need to bounce the stadium to get relevant stuff. They do run the Lysander Labs, and having the bouncing stadium for that is also really good.
Your list having 4 stadiums sounds especially strong against that, because when I was testing that matchup, I was finding that the only games that Pikarom would ever win is when the Lysander Labs stayed in play for too long.
Yeah. Having the 3-1 meant that I could use my stadium early game and still have access to one stadium at the late game at the clutch time. Because again, no one expects you to play 4 stadiums. What are you, crazy?
Yeah, what are you, a moron?
What is this?
I'm an idiot that came 4th. This is the best.
fourth for 4 stadiums. It means something.
It's relevant.
Well, they're all 4 ofs. My deck, 4 stadiums, 4 greens.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Numbers there.
So now you're 4-1. We're on track, and now you're kind of going, I just need to win 2 more. This is going to be easy.
Yeah. Well, I knew 4. I heard people saying that 6 and 2. Some of those will get in. At this point, I'm looking at all my opponents and cursing the ones that have bad resistance. Yeah. Praising the ones that are good. Yes, you can do it.
We can do it.
This was Reshizard again. I get the Kiawe. I don't know if anything interesting happened. This one ran 2 to Tortonators. So,
just an extra baby to knock you out.
Yeah, an extra one to start with, and like it's actually the problem with Tortonator is you Tortonator Kiawe, but then if that gets knocked out, you have nothing. And it's so easy to knock out because even a Reshiram with 4 energies on it being Kiawa'd, it's still very difficult to knock that out on the first turn.
Yeah, he's a bulky boy.
But a Tortonator I would even waste my GX move to knock that out on the first turn.
Just to remove it so that it's not the threat anymore.
Yeah, and it means if you kill the Pokemon that they've Kiawe'd to, Kiawe doesn't have the same versatility as Volcanion because you have to put it all in that single Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's like they've missed a turn, and then you practically won that game from that point. So that's what happened there.
Yep.
So then at this point, what is it? 5 and 1. I'm like,
the dream is real.
Then I get top table versus Christian. I'm like, oh, what are you playing? Oh, Zap Beast.
Oh,
well,
no.
it was fun. It was good. It was fun.
The dream is over.
I managed to win the first game when he only pulled like a Naganadel. He drew like nothing else, and I was able to get the knockout of that. But the other 2 games ended how most Zap Beast games end up. You keep trading 1-1 prizes, and then the Tapu Koko, because I have no hand disruption. They have a hand of like 40 cards or whatever,
and
they bring out Tapu Koko. They bounce the stadium, put the energy on Tapu Koko, bring in the active, use 20,000 electro powers or whatever, and get the knockout with the GX move.
Easy.
Now you're in the position where you're probably gonna have to win out to make top 8.
Yeah. Again, at this point, all the 5 and 2s are all on the same table, and I think there was like 8 of us and 6 of us were all playing Reshi's cards. So like, this is and not a water could be found. We could not be happier.
That's great.
We're fine to knock each other out. We just want to get this water away.
It's funny because there's I
was next to you at that point. I think
I remember at the tournament as well. There was like a ton of there was Naganadel and Quagsire Naganadel, and there was like Zorogong, and it was all floating around, and then there's just this block of like 6 Charizard players.
All on 5-2.
All just sitting there going, all I'm gonna do is win.
It's just I gotta get out of there, gotta get out of the water. Keep running, outrun this tidal wave.
Yeah, it's coming after me. all these Naganadels stinging you on the way out.
That was the match where so game 2, and it's like at 45 minutes at this point. Game 2 is the one where I had the Victini, and I needed to knock out on the Dedenne on the bench. Had to like switch into like a Reshizard to retreat it to get 3 more energies into the discard pile, and then escape rope and all this stuff just to get the knockout on the Dedenne. GX, and then game 3 was over in 3 turns when he didn't draw anything other than the Tornado, which I luckily got into a Guzma, knocked out. Yep. Then Volcanion, Guzma knocked out, and then drew nothing. So I just won that game in like 2 minutes, which is needed because like time was called.
Yeah, it was like it was real close. It was real tight.
Yeah, when you're shuffling at 45 minutes, and you're like,
it's like,
oh boy,
we gotta get there. I was in a situation like that as well.
If only you have a deck that can go really fast.
Yeah, exactly. It was perfect.
And you're both playing Pokemon that give up 3 prizes. You can probably finish a game if it starts on turn 0 almost.
Yeah, it's like bang, bang, bang. That's the end of that one.
And 3 prizes, and 3 prizes, and 3 prizes. And
I was like, well, I'll shake hands. All right, so I think you ended up sneaking in, didn't you, in 8th seed for top 8?
6th. I was
6th seed. Why did I think you were? Who ended up coming first then? Who was first seed? That must have been Andrew. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So 6th seed. So you've got in. You're up against Pikarom in the first round of the finals. Knowing that there's 4 Zapdos Jirachi, you must have been pretty stoked to have probably got the only good matchup out of the other 7 decks that were floating around.
Yeah, because there were 2 Zoroark Dugongs. I don't know exactly how that matchup goes because I avoided it.
Yep, just don't play it.
But I can't imagine it being as good as the Pikarom. Somehow, 720 no scope to that matchup, and I'm like, win or lose, this is my best chance over here. That matchup, even going second, still went 2-0, which was I think it just shows how good this deck goes against tag teams. Because for them to get the knockout with the Pikarom, they need 2 Electro Powers and a Choice Band, and sure, they have Dedennes and Marshadows and Jirachis and all that stuff. But getting those 3 things is still it's not guaranteed.
They've still got to get them, don't they?
Yeah, it's still got to get. You can get the Choice Band the turn before, but you still have to hit the Electro Powers early. And this was a game where he had the Reshizard up and the active and did only 260 damage to it. I I didn't have access to a welder at this point to knock it out, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. Greens, and I'm looking through my deck, and I was like, oh, I don't have any single prize attackers. I'll just attack with Flareon for 30 damage, and then see if. Oh, wait a minute, Flareon has a GX attack. And then I'm doing the maths, and again, there's another Dedenne GX on the field, and I'm like, okay, I only have six energy in my discard pile. Oh wait, Fiery Flint away 2 more energies. Knock out with the GX move, Power Burner GX. That sneaky single prize attack, single energy attacker can be quite useful in some matchups.
Perfect. So you end up winning through top 8. Seems like a relatively comfortable one, and you come up against who did you come? You were up against the great and powerful VDK.
Yeah, it was an okay match. It was not ideal. The 3 stadiums were fun though.
And the good thing is that VDK plays the Buzzwell Pheromosa, so you've got a chance.
I was hoping. I'm like, oh, come on. I assumed all the Zapdoses I was versing, none of them started with it first. I was quite annoyed.
Oh no!
Most of the ones that made top 8, I believe 3 out of 4 of them were running it.
Yeah, so I just wanted that. Was. If you get that full divine intervention happening over there, just start running. I'm like, oh yeah,
yes, I'll hit that. Do it.
I'll hit that with a Volcanion and a
choice band. Yes,
yeah, Volcanion choice band. Thank you. 3 prizes. Let's continue. But
no such luck.
No.
Oh no.
That was a 2-0. But yeah, so my deck needs things to account for the Zapdos matchup.
Yeah, 100%. So actually, now that you mention it, what kind of changes would you make? Like if you were going into the same tournament again, you're playing in it, everyone else is playing the same thing. What kind of cards would you switch in, play extra counts of? What kind of changes would you make?
I need to put in something that disrupts the hand. So it needs a judge or something. Probably remove the Lieutenant Surge for it. I know.
Don't get rid of the Surge. Keep it forever.
Fine. If I keep versing only tag teams, the Surge can stay. Until that time happens, then I gotta find somewhere to disrupt the hand. Because versing Zapdos or another matchup in testing that I found almost impossible was Baby Clowns, the Cephalon, because you just don't disrupt their hand, and they're like, "Oh, cool! I have
I've just got a million energy."
Yeah, I go, "Oh, cool! This Fiery Crystal. This says 150 damage. Yep. Right? Let's just." And then they have wishful. They also have wishful batons, and I'm like, well, okay, I can't do anything in this matchup.
Sweet.
So I need something to disrupt the hand.
Speaking of Baby Blacephalon, there's a few other non-GX attackers that you could consider in this deck, such as Blacephalon and Turtonator, as you were mentioning before. I even saw some players playing the Baby Reshiram. Are there any of those cards that you would consider, or do you think that the Victini is good enough as your backup non-GX attacker?
I'm actually looking at the Baby Reshiram or even the Heatran, because the Heatran is also something sneaky, because it for 30 damage can still knock out a Jirachi and still put 30 damage on the bench somewhere. You could even time it perfectly to skip certain stages, because fire is really limited with the amount of stuff that can attack multiple Pokemon. But there is that Heatran that can do that. The Reshiram doing 130 is also really good, because the issue I had against once my 2 Kukuis were gone, I had nothing apart from like a fully loaded up Reshizard that could actually knock out Buzzwole. And so sometimes they got multiple 120 damage turns, which wasn't nice.
Yeah, that's never good.
No.
Give those beast turns when you get more than one. You're always happy to see it. How about the Fire Crystal Fiery Flint numbers? Would you change those at all, or leave those the same?
I really like that 4-1. I think that's with this deck, with the way this deck is run with the greens and Pokegear. I think you really need that. It also, the more flints actually make your greens, makes your Pokegears way more effective.
Because you're removing all that fire energy, so you're not going to hit a handful of fire off of the Pokegear, which is really good.
Yeah, I would have times where I would have 2 flints in my hand. I'm like, I'm just going to remove 6 energy out of my deck, so I can get a greens gear that's going to get me into a lot more items.
Yeah, 100%. So overall, how do you feel about the list? Pretty solid?
Yeah, pretty solid. I'd definitely continue playing this one. Just tweaking with like individual Pokemon for individual matchups, like the Reshiram, that 130 damage is nice. Maybe spicing around with a Tornado. It can actually replace a Reshiram Charizard GX in some cases to bring it down to 2 Reshiram Charizards because it can do as much damage with the energy on your field. You don't get the same recursion with it because that energy is obviously gone. But you can combine it with like a Victini. If you have a Victini to follow it up, it should be fine.
Yeah,
Flareon in certain scenarios could be pretty good if you haven't used your GX attack.
Yeah, you could have a time where you use the Tornado, knock out a Charizard, and then you use your Flareon GX move for a single energy, and then you use your Victini to shuffle it all back into the deck, and then weld it onto another Resh. He's like, what more do you want?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. The bad thing about that is that you've got so many energy in the discard that by the time you've played all those 3 attacks, you don't even have to attack with the Reshizard because you've already taken 6 prizes.
Yeah.
It's well, bang, bang, bang.
The smallest violin, I was saying, Lieutenant Surge is such a useless card, I never got to use it. Never got to use it until top 8. Like,
I was so far in front of all of my matchups that I couldn't play Surge. It was such a good card.
Yeah, high win rate for a card that never gets played.
Nah, that's good. That's good. But hey, anyway, thanks for coming along, David, and sharing this one with us. It's really cool to see people like innovating and using interesting cards rather than just picking off, this is what everyone else is playing. I'll do this as well and change 1 or 2. So it's really good to see people actually thinking about their lists, which you've obviously done with this one.
Oh, thank you.
No worries. And thanks, Jordan, for coming along and talking through it with us.
Of course, it was good.
And thank you everyone for watching. If you like the content, then please consider subscribing. Click that sable eye in the middle to subscribe to the channel. On the left-hand side of the screen, you will see a video that YouTube thinks that you might like. And on the right-hand side, you'll see our Unbroken Bonds playlist for more from the Sable Eyes. Until next time, let's keep going. I've stuffed up my outro now, but that's okay. I know that no one's listening. It's fine. We'll catch you all next time. See ya.